in many countries, it's not enough, in actually almost all countries of the world, it's not enough just to have a law degree. You need to do some additional training, some additional bar exam or a course in order to be qualified to practice law, which underlines the limitations of traditional university education, because they're not making students immediately ready for the practice of law. They need to do additional training, take additional courses, sit additional exams to become practitioners, which highlights the need to have more flexibility in the area of legal education. And here the role of online education is difficult to overestimate. And also this highlights the need to have more practitioners in the area of legal education. So at the core of my research, and it will be published as a book hopefully next year, was a continuous my continuous work on creating one course, one online course, and then subsequently refining this course in the light of feedback from those who took the course, in the light of additional research which I was undertaking, reading articles, books, and so on. And I will talk more about this course in a moment. Before talking about this course and the guiding principles for this course, which I suggest can also be applied elsewhere to other courses, to other disciplines, let me say a few words about what makes a legal education different from other disciplines. In 2009 and 2020, very shortly after the COVID pandemic, I conducted a series of interviews with senior practicing lawyers, and I was asking them a few questions, but the main question was essentially what, in their opinion, makes lawyers good lawyers. So they were all partners with big law firms, and I was curious how they decide whether a particular person is a good lawyer or not a good lawyer, and what qualities it takes for someone to become a good lawyer. Before asking this question, I looked at various publications with this topic, not only from academics, but also from professional organizations such as the American Bar Association, which, for instance, emphasizes the unique nature of legal education, involving active participation in a learning community to develop practical skills. And my literature review was suggesting that the primary goal of legal education was to teach individuals to think like lawyers, translating complex legal situations into clear legal procedures, and come up with strategies to advance their either client's cause or their employer's cause. And lawyers play different roles in society, so it's difficult to summarize in a short sentence or two what exactly lawyers are supposed to do. Because if you think about the judge has one role. If you think about a private practitioner appearing before a judge, this person has a different role. If you think about the government official who is a lawyer, it has even the difference will be even greater. However, it looks like in whatever area of law you work, there are some features which are common. I think see what I can. Yeah, so the interviews which I conducted helped me to identify 7 essential legal skills. So the first skill, which according to my interviewees, I think there were 14 of them, was focusing on the factual nuances that matter. So the lawyer should understand what factual patterns, situations, facts actually matter and which ones are not important. Because very often lawyers have to deal with vast amounts of information, lots of documents, and they have to make sense of what matters and what doesn't matter. The second step is spotting critical legal issues. So understanding how to distinguish between less important and more important issues was not something which you could learn at law schools, according to my interviewees. It takes usually time, it takes experience to understand what is important and what is not important. And they also thought that it was crucial to anticipate certain critical legal issues in advance, so that you can highlight, okay, I have read all those documents, I know the facts now, and these are the three main points. I think, let's say, our position is should be focused primarily on these three issues. The next thing which they thought was important is the ability to find the relevant law. And most people whom I interviewed highlighted that it was important to find the relevant law rather than to memorize the relevant law. So it doesn't matter whether you remember a particular clause or a particular instrument, but it's important for you to be able to quickly find it and say, okay, this is the relevant statute or a court decision, and having done that, it was important for them to understand the dynamic nature of law and the need for practical approach. So if it's a law which was adopted a long time ago, maybe it makes sense to see whether there was a new edition, whether it's not obsolete, to read commentary and so on. The next point which they thought was important is the ability to apply law in the relevant context. So in other words, it was important to understand various aspects, practical aspects beyond applicable law, and recognize the commercial, the political, the economic context, and also the client's needs. Laws do not operate in vacuum. They operate in a certain cultural environment, political environment, and so on. And so the ability to apply law in the relevant context was crucial. The next one was identifying strengths and weaknesses of various positions. So that involves the ability to conduct objective analysis, defending various points of view, and also assessing risks and benefits of various options. So in other words, it was important to understand not only your own position, but also a position which could be taken by another party. And I have to say that those people whom I interviewed were a mix of transactional lawyers, so people who were preparing documents or solicitors, and litigation or dispute resolution lawyers. So you would think that there would be differences between, significant differences between these two, because some are more focused on advocacy and others are more focused on creating legal documents, but actually they were on the same page when it comes to all those 7 legal skills. And assessing the risks and benefits of various options, it comes into play in many situations. Even if you are not a trial lawyer, if you're not an arbitration lawyer, if you are putting together a contract, you need to think about what the other party may put into the contract, what their arguments could be for including this or that. So identifying strengths and weaknesses of various positions was quite important. The next one was generating client-centric solutions. So creating creative solutions in a specific context was particularly praised by my interviewees. They thought that it was important to develop strategies in disputes or transactional advice, looking at your particular client, whether, let's say, it's a government who is your client or your employer, whether you are a judge and you are serving justice, and that's in a way your client, or you are a commercial practitioner and you're representing interests of a business. So understanding this client-centric approach was crucial. And finally, they thought that effectively presenting solutions was important, both in the context of dispute resolution, but also in the context of transactional lawyers. Because in the context of dispute resolution, obviously you need to persuade a judge or an arbitrator. In the context of transactional lawyer, you need to persuade the other side that this clause, for example, makes sense, or you need to modify a particular clause or remove. So these advocacy skills, they're relevant not only for litigators, but also for transactional lawyers. So the interviews with senior legal practitioners not only contributed to refining my course, but also provided insight into how technology can be utilized for legal education. And it also helped to identify areas where junior lawyers often lacked skills. My interviewees highlighted the evolving nature of legal practice, the gap between legal education and practice, and the need for practical relevant training for legal professionals. And now let me move to a few theories which, in the context of general education or education studies, are considered as basic theories which everybody knows and which everyone builds upon other theories. In the context of education, one of such important concepts is the concept of scaffolding. So scaffolding, as we know, is something which you have on the construction side in order to support a building, right? If you want to renovate a building or if you want to build a new structure, you put scaffolding which allows you to access different parts of the building. So in the context of legal education, there is a similar concept, also called scaffolding. And the idea here is that the role of the teacher is actually not to somehow make the student memorize information, but to create the right structures around the student or the learner, so that the learner can easily use this scaffolding to build his or her own expertise and knowledge and skills. And as learning progresses, this support, this scaffolding is gradually removed, allowing them to attain the same goals independently. So this is called the concept of fading. So gradually you remove this scaffolding, and then the learner can already handle certain situations even without any additional support from the educator. Some people also call this concept as knowledge assembly, highlighting the process of connecting prior knowledge and newer information. So it's always important to understand what the person already knows and where you want to get. And connecting these two is at the essence of a learning process. And the idea of scaffolding can be traced back to one influential education theorist, a psychologist, whose name is Lev Vygotsky, who was actually born in Belarus, the same country where I was born. And he emphasized human development in naturally occurring activities and learning through context. One theory which he came up with is called the zone of proximal development. It was a central concept in Vygotsky's approach, and it refers to the gap between the learner's actual level of development and potential level of development with guidance. So the role of educators is actually to guide from the already existing knowledge to this potential knowledge, and understanding when it's appropriate for a learner to acquire certain knowledge based on their current development is crucial. So when you can remove this scaffolding, that's a tricky process which you need to do, understanding the current level by, for example, using various feedback techniques, tests, exams, and so on. Discovering what learners already know involves actively accessing their thinking, using formative assessments to gauge their knowledge. And the bridging strategy within the scaffolding theory helps to link prior concepts to new knowledge using intermediate analogies. For example, in legal education, this could involve moving from general legal concepts to specific applications, or from the language of statutes to their interpretation by courts. The use of advanced organizers is another scaffolding technique. It helps learners to think about what they already know in advance, facilitating the organization of new material. The method involves referencing relevant concepts familiar to learners before introducing more abstract and detailed information. While scaffolding was originally developed for children, it has been widely adapted for technologically mediated activities. And this integration of technology, in online learning, for example, using videos, quizzes, learning journals, offers new opportunities for scaffolding. However, at the same time, you can imagine that it's more difficult to do this scaffolding and very tailored approach in the context of online learning, where there is no direct interaction between students and instructors. particularly in the context of the so-called asynchronous courses, which are like pre-recorded courses. However, some techniques are already there, and for example, you can have tests which very precisely determine the educational needs of a particular learner, and there are other ways to provide scaffolding opportunities. A recent application of scaffolding involves not only providing structure, but also withdrawing scaffolding or fading the scaffolding. So gradually transferring responsibility to learners, allowing them to take more control over their learning. And the rate of fading is determined by the learner's level of development. So scaffolding is a central concept. Another concept which I was curious in understanding more is how to construct narratives in the context of education. Narratives are essentially accounts of connected events or stories frequently used in educational media, including books, lectures, and videos, and they serve to communicate messages, encourage critical thinking, and provide a safe environment for learners to explore various scenarios. In the context of legal education, the purpose of media is to transform raw materials into learning resources. Each learner constructs their own contextualized understanding from available information. And instead of pressing, for example, one of tips which I thought was quite useful was when you're trying to present a particular concept, it's important to avoid overloading your learners with facts. So instead of presenting various facts to demonstrate a legal principle, it's more effective to focus the learner's attention on what truly matters. So using the same scenario and slightly change the facts and then see how a particular legal principle applies, rather than come up with a completely new set of facts, because then the knowledge of your, so not the knowledge, but the attention of your learner is distracted to other things. At the same time, there are techniques which invite us to use very different factual contexts. For example, the technique of defamiliarization can be employed to present seamlessly obvious facts in a strange way, enhancing learners' perception of the familiar. So, for example, I don't know, you can talk about a real estate transaction on the moon between between one astronaut from the United States and one, I don't know, from Russia. And so if you can create vivid examples, they may stick in the memory of your learners, and then it will be easier for them to remember and actually even to relate to that particular concept. Another valuable theory is the distinction between deep level processing and surface level processing. So essentially, deep level processing is going beyond memorizing legal texts, but understand the reasons behind their adoption and their varied interpretations. And so you can give different texts to essentially trying to facilitate a deep level learning of a particular principle or of a particular logic. And the surface level learning is that they will know the facts, they will know how to resolve a particular, for example, case or a particular legal dilemma. A deep level processing would involve the understanding of the internal logic of the things, and then using these reasons to adopt for other situations and other interpretations. Narratives are more effective when new information is connected to the background knowledge of learners, which they already have. So, for instance, if you are talking to students from India, it makes sense to connect the new information to the knowledge which they already have about let's say, a particular region or a particular state, or maybe even a particular TV show, and say, how this applies there, because then it's easier for people to relate to this knowledge, as opposed to thinking about situations from the United States or England, which may not ring the bell, which may be too foreign for them to understand. So it helps them to memorize better, and also to discern specific features important for their learning goals. Another approach which education theorists recommend is the detective stories approach, which involves fashioning explanations like detective stories, treating examples as puzzles that require explanation. When designing narratives, it's essential for learners to discern various structural levels within a text or a video or an audio to understand the intended meaning. This is why when you are preparing narratives, be it in the form of lecture notes, books, or other learning materials, it's important to have a clear structure. If it's a visual, these are visual resources, then with headings, signposts, and paragraphs to help learners better understand not only the text itself, but also the internal logic and the structure of the text. In legal education, focusing on court judgments can be helpful because court judgments are essentially narratives, and it's a good opportunity. They give good opportunity to distinguish those facts which matter from those facts which are secondary and not effective. And also, it could be useful to ask your students to predict court reasoning. So, for example, give them a case, facts of a particular case, and say, so what do you think that the decision should be? And then see different responses, and then explain the response which the court adopted. The rhetorical persuasiveness of a narrative depends on the unity of these elements, of how you structure it, but also of credibility, emotional appeal, and logical content of the presentation. And here, scaffolding is crucial in constructing effective narrative for learning, because narratives could be structured to help learners progress using approaches such as moving from familiar to advanced situations, contrasting cases, employing a detective story approach, which I mentioned. And the concept of scaffolding can be applied not only to text, but also to videos, to audios, recognizing the unique characteristics of each medium of this education. Now, let me talk about some practical application of those theories. And one of those practical theories is the so-called conversational framework developed by Professor Diane Laurillide. And essentially, this conversational framework develops, emphasizes constant communication between the educator and the learner, and also communication between peers. And when we think about those theories which we discussed earlier, many of them actually come from educating children, not adults, but children. And one important and very interesting, at least for me, finding was that children usually learn not from their educators, not from their teachers, but from their peers. So if the instructor is telling certain things, many times you cannot be certain whether they will follow or not. However, if all of their peers, or if most of their peers do it in a certain way, they will do it as well. I can observe it myself looking at my young kids. When the older kids start doing something, I don't need to persuade the younger one that she needs to do the same, because she will do exactly the same what the older kids do, because that seems more persuasive to them. So this ability to learn from peers should not be overestimated, because peers constitute an important part of the learning environment. So she identified 6 types of learning divided into individual and social categories, which can be applied across various levels and sectors of formal education, training, or professional development. These 6 types are: the first one is learning through acquisition, so acquisition of knowledge, and it involves reading, listening, and watching explanations provided for teacher. And learners actually spend a significant amount of time, most of their time, in this acquisition mode, when they read or listen to a lecture rather than do something else. And in this context, it's very important to go back to the theory of having structured narrative, of scaffolding, and so on. The second second type of learning activity is learning through inquiry. And this is different from acquisition, because here the learners conduct individual investigation of texts and resources, trying to understand, find questions for particular answers, and analyzing data in order to find those answers. Learning through inquiry encourages learners to ask questions, seek information, and understand the application of theory. And it highlights the importance of using real-world or authentic problems for motivation and effective learning. So an example of learning through inquiry would be, find the statute which regulates the sale of aircraft in a particular jurisdiction. So that's inquiry. They need to dig through various materials trying to find an answer to this question. The third one is learning through discussion. It allows learners to generate thoughts, understand concepts, and learn from each other through discussions. Discussions can take place in traditional seminars, tutorials, or online discussion groups. And discussions simulate communication, articulation of ideas, and testing against peer feedback. So this is one of types of social learning, where you learn not from the teacher, although discussions can also be with teachers, but primarily it's between learners themselves. The next one is learning through production. It involves writing essays, statements, creating videos, or other manifestations of learning. And it motivates learners to consolidate and articulate what they have already learned, and may include activities also such as writing reflective journals to greater stimulate deep learning rather than surface learning. Learning through collaboration involves working in teams to achieve joint outputs, acquire necessary skills, and enhance understanding. And collaboration also relieves educators from micromanaging the learning process, as learners discuss and defend ideas among themselves. It also encourages peer feedback and the creation of shared outputs, such as wikis or presentations. And finally, the sixth type is learning through practice. It involves in authentic activities and receiving feedback on performance. It emphasizes the importance of learning by doing, experience, and intrinsic feedback. Oh, by the way, I haven't mentioned the distinction between extrinsic feedback and intrinsic feedback. Extrinsic feedback comes from lecturers. For example, you're saying, well done, this is a great essay, you performed better than anyone else. Well, the first point you addressed particularly well. Intrinsic feedback is when you have feedback from your own activities. So, for example, you talk to, let's say, a good example of learning through practice is learning through moot courts, because that emulates real practice. And here, intrinsic feedback would be you're making a particular point to a judge or to a moot court judge, and the judge says, "Well, I'm sorry, but can you clarify this point because I didn't really get it, right?" Or if the judge says, "Well, I don't think that this is that this is a valid legal point," or something like that. So you get a response from practice rather than from a teacher. And it must be noted that in the context of online learning, all those types of learning can be used, but it can be quite difficult to create opportunities for social learning in the absence of face-to-face contact. And probably many of us have experienced this during the COVID pandemic, when most of the learning was online, how difficult it was to manage groups. We got better with it, but it's still a challenge to emulate the same face-to-face contact which you have in the offline format. And here, games provide quite a good way of teaching, and in a way, moot courts are also games, and they allow you to practice law. They allow you to get intrinsic feedback, They will allow you to get extrinsic feedback if you have a coach, for example, and they can also create natural environment to develop legal skills. So now as I see that my time is almost up, so let me finish by discussing the model which I have come up with on the basis of my research, and it's called Contextualized Active Learning Adaptive Skills Model. The abbreviation is CALAS. And this model is used for learning, design, and legal education, and it's focusing on improving practice-oriented learning materials, integrating interactive elements into teaching, and incorporating various active learning methods as well, as opposed to passive learning methods. And although most of those suggestions relate to online learning, they can also be used in the context of online or sort of offline, sort of normal face-to-face learning. So here, the important part of this model is to have active learning techniques in education, because learners spend a significant portion of their time in the acquisition mode, watching videos, reading texts, and you can make your texts or other narratives more interactive by asking questions during videos or integrating them into texts, and making videos not excessively long, but splitting them into short video chunks, including pre and post video quizzes, scenario related activities, and also learning journals, because these activities can make learning, regardless of whether it's online learning or offline learning, more active. And planning learning activities is crucial for in-person education, but it's even more crucial for online activities. And often, the more time you invest initially in preparing teaching materials for a course, the less time it takes later for you to actually micromanage the course, because many things can be done either automatically or following a prescribed script. It's important in the context of both online learning and offline learning to retain attention and motivation of learners, to prevent boredom and maintain learners' attention. And the important techniques here include avoiding excessive use of legal jargon, avoiding long sentences, monotonous tones, and excessive graphics or text on the screen. It's important to maintain a clear structure using different presentation formats. So, for example, when I was creating my course, I had each class consisted of three parts. The first part was my own introduction into the topic of around 10 minutes. The main part was actually not me speaking, but me interviewing a practitioner for about 25 minutes. And then at the end, I would give a summary of the key elements. And the learners really appreciated the involvement of practitioners, because not only it connected them better to the real world, but it also was more fun to watch than watching someone lecturing you for 45 minutes. So here you have these three pillars of the model: contextualized, active, and adaptive skills. Context-based learning means presenting new knowledge within the broader context of its practical application. So rather than talking about legal principles in abstract, it's important to ground it in facts, in cases. It's also important to engage experienced practitioners in teaching through interviews or bringing them in as guest speakers, because students, learners appreciate it. It's more fun for them. It also allows to connect new knowledge to practical contexts. It also allows to contextualize new knowledge by connecting it to their own experiences. Active learning means creating outcome-oriented exercises with feedback, emphasizing what is essential and what is less essential, maintaining learning focus and interest on presentational formats. So as I said, it can be interviews, it can be videos from a court hearing, So just having a mixture so that you keep attention of learners and prevent them from checking their Facebook or whatever social media platform they're using. Also, it's important to guide learners to develop self-regulated learning, allowing them to control the pace and sequence of learning. And that's particularly easy to do in the online context, because that allows each student to have his or her own pace of learning. It's a bit more complicated in the normal face-to-face learning. And finally, learning aimed at adaptive cognitive skills. So it's important to elicit critical thinking by connecting new knowledge to pre-existing knowledge. And again, the technique of asking rhetorical questions in the text, in your narratives, in your videos is quite helpful. It's useful to include learning activities for practical application in different contexts, incorporating what-if questions and diagnostic assessment. So then you can say, okay, this is the factual pattern, what if? And then you change one element and see whether it makes any difference. And that relates to the important skill which we discussed earlier, the ability to apply law in a particular context. And also it's important to have diagnostic assessments. So an important part of that online course is that there are pre-topic quizzes and post-topic quizzes, and the questions are the same. So they ask 10 questions before they cover the material. First of all, it helps them to focus on the issues which really matter. And secondly, when they do it for the second time after having viewed the video, then they clearly see their progress, the progress which they have made answering the same questions. And it also allows them to understand what are their weak areas and what are their strong areas. And finally, it's important to guide and support the development of specific professional skills, simulating situations where adaptive cognitive skills are essential. And adaptive skills means that the students can adapt to various factual situations, various cultural contexts, even to different legal systems. So we don't have that much time left. So let me just show you, if you're interested in the course itself, you can, I think you can take essentially 1/7 of the course for free, and then you are asked to pay for it. But it's called International Investment Law Dispute Resolution. If you Google it, you can find more about it, where these theories are actually employed. And here you can see some of those people whom I interviewed, because they are known as specialists in particular areas, and this is why I brought them in. Actually, no, I went to see them with a video camera to interview them about those particular topics. And here you can see I'm sitting interviewing two partners of a law firm, and they're sitting in a professional environment in their offices. Students really love it. Also, during my presentations, I was also adding infographics, because that allows them to focus on specific topics and makes texts a bit more memorable. But also, I'm using this theory in the real world, teaching in face-to-face teaching. For instance, we're organizing winter school in Switzerland, in Basel, about various arbitration mechanisms, and another school in London every summer, where we focus on other types of mechanisms, arbitration mechanisms. And an important element of both of those schools is a learning journal, a reflective journal. So after each class, we give learners half an hour to summarize the key takeaways of that course. So they write it down. And the idea here is that it allows them to focus on those issues which really matter. And it also helps them to memorize new information better, because if you write things down, you can remember them better. And then they're asked to submit their learning journals at the end. So in a way, it's also a form of controlling whether people actually did their work or not. But we don't really check whether what they have written is correct or incorrect. We just make sure that they have done some thinking. And even though this thinking may be wrong, still it's a process. And so we use this quite actively use it. So I think my time is up, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them either now or later. This is my name. If you Google me, you can find easily my email address. And I have 2 doctors, because I did a doctorate in law and in education. So it's not a typo. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Professor Yarik. It was, very lucid and structured. And during the COVID pandemic, you all were exploring ways how to innovate these online courses. And I had more of a quote and
Yes, yeah, please do. And if you have any feedback, let me know. Or if you have students who want to learn more about investment arbitration, they're more than welcome to take it. Actually, many government lawyers, somehow government lawyers are the main user of that course. We ended up having governors from various countries. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm more visible in this field, because I work with some intergovernmental organizations, and delegations of governments come and they feel maybe that they don't know enough about it. And rather than enrolling in a proper course, which takes time, they can just enroll on this course and do it in their spare time. But yeah, hopefully I will turn this into a book next year, and it will be an open access book, so it should be possible to download it and read it. Yeah. Yes, please. Mm. Yeah. Yes. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are excellent questions. And on the difference between disciplines, um, well, intuitively, if you think about teaching law and teaching philosophy, you can see that these are two different disciplines, right? Philosophy has no apparent practical application. It's thinking, conceptualizing, and so on. While law and legal practice, you can easily think of ways how this knowledge can be used in real life. And this is why when I was looking at other disciplines, which would be, on the one hand, theoretical and conceptually complicated, because law is conceptually quite complicated. If you think about sources of law, hierarchy of law, interaction of different state institutions, and you name it, interpretation of law, techniques, and so on. And at the same time, practical impact, the closest analogy would be medical education. Because there you also have theory, which you read on in the books. You're trying to understand how it works, and then you need to apply this theory in practice. And it's not always that easy. You cannot go after reading a medical book and perform a brain surgery, right? It takes time to learn, to understand. And actually, for many years, probably in all jurisdictions, law has not been a taught profession. It was more based on an apprenticeship model. So someone who is a senior lawyer would have a helper, and this helper would shadow this person until this person becomes capable of doing these things on his own or on her own. And so law is a very practical profession. And also in medical education, there is also an expectation that not only to go through the theory, but also you need to have some spell of practical training experience at the hospital or somewhere else before you can properly qualify as a doctor. And the same applies to many jurisdictions in the world. For instance, in or in the UK, if you want to become a solicitor, you need to have a 2-year training contract. Or if you want to have a barrister, to become a barrister, you need to have a pupillage contract. In other countries, it's less explicit. Or for example, in Poland, I know in Belarus, in Russia, in those countries, you're also supposed to have at least half a year of practical experience before you can even get a diploma of a practitioner. So I think this combination of theoretical knowledge, to a significant extent, of philosophical knowledge, and practical application is what makes a law different. And also the skills which I identified, although they were discussed with lawyers and in the context of law, but you can think about other disciplines, and they can also apply these steps, like focusing on factual nuances. In most cases, there are facts. Spotting critical, could be not legal, maybe let's say medical issues like health issues, finding the relevant law, finding the relevant prescription, or the relevant procedure, applying it to a particular patient. Right, so all those things are very similar. But I think what makes law different is this a more structured theory, which at the same time cannot exist on its own. It needs to be applied in a particular context. And the second question was how to move, link existing knowledge to new knowledge. Well, let's think about our arbitration. So the concept, I say there is a concept of separability of arbitration clause in arbitration, which means that even if the entire contract is invalid, arbitration clause remains valid because we need it to keep the dispute resolution mechanism alive, right? So to understand what happens to the rest of the contract. And let's imagine that the students know nothing about arbitration yet, but they already know the principles of contract law. So what is invalidity of contract? So you discuss invalidity of contracts in detail and the normal consequences of invalidity, but then you add this complicated, more complicated and new element. You say, well, in the context of arbitration, not the whole contract becomes invalid, but all parts of the contract except for the arbitration clause. And the arbitration clause survives for this and these reasons. But then you can add another complication. The clause itself can be invalid if the reason for invalidity relates to this particular clause. Let's say someone received a bribe to go to a particular to have a particular arbitration institution included in the clause. Right. So gradually you're building from a more general knowledge of contract law to more specific knowledge of arbitration law, and then going to an exception which applies in this context. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Well, there are different classifications of legal skills, and people come up with all sorts of distinctions. If I understand correctly, soft skills are not those skills which go exactly to law, but they're sort of more broader skills which you apply in the context of law, right? Is my understanding correct of what you mean by soft skills?
So what's this?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah.
So you need to.
Yeah. Mm.
But
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Mm.
you can.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I can see what you mean. Yeah. I think that those skills will be covered by number seven, actually, effectively presenting solutions, because it's one thing to understand, okay, these are our strengths, these are our weaknesses. It's another thing actually to make use of the strength of your position or make use of the weaknesses of the other positions. And presenting does not necessarily mean arguing in favor of a particular point. Sometimes it means conceding a point or explaining why a particular position should be taken also by the other party, or why the party should settle. So I think these skills would be under seven rather than under five. So five is more internal evaluation of what is happening, where we're strong, where we're weak, where we can develop and be more firm, and where we probably should give a bit of more freedom to the other side and so on. Yeah, I think it's more number seven, but yeah, it is an important skill as well. These are important skills. Mhm. Yeah, yes, this is a big problem for many online courses, that it's difficult to motivate people, particularly if they are asked just to watch something. And this is why a few recommendations which I followed is to split bigger topics into smaller ones, to have external speakers, to have is clear requirements of what they need to produce after each bit. So, for example, for this online course, they're expected to respond to 3 questions for their online journal. So they have learned, they have done the quizzes, they have watched the videos, including the interview, and now they need to answer these 3 questions. Again, I don't want to spend too much time, giving them feedback on their responses, but it gives them certain milestones and motivation to do it. And because it's an asynchronous course, they can take it at any time. So if a particular time does not work for some, they can come back to it later. They can pause and resume later. But this online, but this learning journal element, that also helps to discipline them, and then for you to see whether they have actually done the work, not just the test at the end. Well, first of all, they cannot progress until they answer all, let's say, either 100% of questions correctly, or let's say 90% of questions correctly. They cannot progress to the next topic. The second one is they need to submit at the end a learning journal, and I can't remember how many. I think up to 500 words on a particular topic they should write. So like almost a page. And it can be any thoughts which they have. So it's not super technical, but it gives a certain discipline for them. And then you can say, okay, 20 pages, doesn't look like it's plagiarized, makes sense. So that's another thing. And then, yeah, having external people also helps. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Well, to a significant extent, it also applies to those people who do not want to practice law. Although the majority of people, I think the idea is that they practice law after they're done with their degree, rather than, let's say, become legal academics. But if you think about these principles, for example, in the context of legal academia, I think they can still work because you need to have a particular factual problem with which your legal analysis deals. You need to spot critical legal issues. You need to find the relevant law. You need to apply it, taking into account the context. You need to identify strengths and weaknesses, and so on. So I think even if you think about people, I think the minority of people who will not be practicing law after having secured their law degree, it's still, I think, even for for mental processing of information about law, it's still useful. Yeah, judges, although you know, judges really have to deal with real life issues even more than many lawyers outside courts. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's for them, the context, the broader context, is one thing, and then client-specific solutions would have a different meaning for them. For them, the client is the state or justice, something different than a particular firm or an individual. Yep.
Opportunity to express my gratitude and thanks first and foremost to the head of our institution, Professor Vajpayee, whose brainchild this second edition of Jurist Speaks was, the registrar of the university, Professor Ruby Paul, and her office, wherein the clearances for holding this program were all very smooth. My other colleagues, Dr. Neeraj Kumar, Dr. Yogesh Pai, and Professor Maheshwar Singh for their support. Professor Anirudh Rajput, without whose initiation this was not possible, and he will be amongst us soon in February. The IT support, technical support, and the housekeeping staff at the university. To all my colleagues present here for a patient hearing, please forgive me if I'm forgetting anyone. Okay, last but not the least, our speaker, Professor Yarik Roy, who straddled across continents to be with us here today and share his valuable insights from his upcoming book on legal education. We look forward to more such engagements in the future. And now I will request our registrar, Professor Ruby Paul, to extend a token of appreciation to the guest.
Thank you very much.
Please join us for high tea outside.